Thanks for coming to the last talk of the day. I appreciate you being here. And thank you to the IGDA for giving me an opportunity to talk about some things that are very near and dear to my heart. I don't have that opportunity very often, so thank you. I really appreciate so many familiar faces here to say hi to me. And I might cuss. Sorry. I'm not sorry. All right. Okay. So my original talk was going to be about unintentionally finding yourself speaking for others. But that was actually the fallout of me giving this talk previous, and I felt that this would be more valuable for our leaders who are still here today. So, the games industry has been taking great strides in discussing diversity and discrimination, and this is a really great thing that we're trying so hard to create these safe spaces. But as leadership roles go up, diversity goes down. And in the context of our leaders and their teams, the parts of each other that we find relatable become fewer. I'm not here to try to criticize that or explain how to fix it. Honestly, I wouldn't know where to start. But I do want to shift the conversation a bit. We know diversity is good. Without it, we create echo chambers, it's bad for business. Those conversations are extrinsic, they're observational, and in the case of this particular quote, kind of misses the point. It lacks the humanity, which is why we have the problem in the first place. So, what I want to do is I want to try to talk about the intrinsic, the interpersonal dialogue that we have with ourselves when we feel outnumbered. We probably don't even realize what our own silence is actually saying when it's happening. These are really important images to see because it takes a lot to push through and create them for ourselves. The heartbreaking thing about this and the ironic thing about it is that that internal conversation that we don't like to talk about is the very thing that closes the gap to begin with. So I'm Renee Nejo. I'm Renee Nejo. I am half Digueño, or Kumeyaay, which really kind of depends on which book about the history of Southern California you read. I even have this club member card to prove it. This is a thing I carry around. It's a blood quantum card. And it says on the back that I am 0.21875 blood quantum. That's how much Native American blood I have in me. Now, if you are familiar with basic arithmetic, that's not half. 0.24 or 0.21875 is not half. So I'm not a liar. There is backstory here, and I'll try to be brief. My grandfather, who passed away before I was born, opted out of being Native American. He, for whatever reasons, he didn't want it. He didn't want the blood quantum card, whatever. And now, because he didn't enroll, I don't get to be recognized his portion through the government. I find it interesting how the decisions of a man I never knew who died before I was born had such a profound impact on how I view my own identity. So blood quantum itself is a backwards racist system that was created to ensure the extinction of my family and me and a lot of people I love. It's a thing that matters when it shouldn't, and I'm creating a game about it. But deciding to create the game was a colossal hurdle for me. I wanted to make it, but I kept talking myself out of it, out of ever creating it. So whenever I have a struggle, I go to my elders, and in this case, it was my father. And we discussed how we tell our stories from across different mediums. These are both things that really exist, and I'm actually kind of excited about both of them. Last of the Mohicans is another great book that's meant a lot to me growing up. We talked about John Wayne, to smoke signals, movies. And we even talked about how others tell our stories. And if you haven't seen this, you should, because this is going to give you a lot of perspective on how having somebody else speak for you and what that looks like. Now, we don't ever talk about how our stories, or I'm sorry, at one point my father asked me, why don't we tell our stories more? As like a way to try to get me to think about it. And my knee-jerk reaction was education, access to resources, technology, network. And I had all of those things and I was still having trouble. And then I thought, oh my gosh, no, wait, we totally do. We do tell our stories. But for me, it was only in safe spaces, among friends and allies where I knew I wouldn't be made fun of. And I wasn't really satisfied with that answer, and neither was he. When I thought about this question more, I realized he wasn't just asking, why aren't we talking about ourselves? He was asking, why aren't we telling them our stories? Why aren't we trying to close that gap? And that's when things started to click a little. So there's this thing. Everyone has it. No one wants to talk about it. And I'm going to spill all of mine out here for you to see. This is pretty terrifying, so bear with me. Okay. If you are fortunate enough, and in my case Native American, to be part of people, you are not a fraction of that person, half, 1/4, 1/16 Cherokee, it doesn't matter. If you have Indian blood in you, you're Native American. It's that simple. You are from this land. You are lucky enough to experience what it feels like to have your blood connect you to the ground you walk on. This is unique about America, because in other countries, not all, but it's common for the majority who live there to be from that land. If you're Irish and in Ireland, you know what that feels like. If you're Swedish in Sweden, you know what that feels like. You can be patriotic, and that's awesome, but it's not the same. It took me almost my entire life to realize this. I had always held my identity as though it were broken in pieces and fractions. My father called this walking two worlds, but his history is different. He was born on the res, grew up on the res, made a life off of the res, and he took with him his identity wherever he went. For me, the world that I was in, I was always looking into the other, feeling like an outcast. Non-native world, I dreaded explaining why my name didn't sound American. And on the res, I was always afraid of being called out for being white or not really native, and that happened. It happened a lot. So I had imposter syndrome of the identity. It was hardwired into my blood. And I have a reminder that I continue to carry around with me because I have to if I'm going to be recognized as such by my government. So I have an anecdote for you of how I was silenced once. Back in 2014 at the Game Developers Conference, my husband came to me and he was pissed. He described to me a booth for an online marketing company who essentially had booth babes dressed as Native Americans. And I regret this in hindsight, but at the time I made fun of him. I told him, you're new at being mad about this kind of thing. This sort of stuff happens all the time. Like, I was trying to make it roll off my shoulders. But he's the kind of person that's used to me teasing him, so he goes to the office anyway to complain. And that's just the kind of person he is. He sees something wrong, and he tries to fix it. So, curious about what he described to me, I immediately go to the expo floor, and I find the booth, and this is what I saw. GLISPA, your online rainmaker, written in giant letters across the counter. I assume that this is a reference to the rituals of the indigenous people of the Southwest and a spiritual prayer for rain. And that's the same thing as what you do in a club, right? Making it rain, right. I read, not heard, that the word Glispa was a Navajo deity and said that had given the Navajo the gift of healing. So like literally everything about the statement written across was stolen and given a different context entirely. Next to the counter was a large teepee, which were the homes of the Great Plains Indians, like the Lakota and the Sioux tribes and the Sioux nations. And I assume that this is where the Glispa had its meetings for its future clients. Next to the counter, or next to the teepee, were two young women wearing short, frayed, beaded dresses, which was obviously an homage to the Walt Disney tribe, because I could not pinpoint where exactly they were getting their inspiration from. I see all of this at the time, and I feel absolutely sick to my stomach. And it hit me a lot harder than I ever expected it to, because I feel like I should be used to this by now. I became immediately self-aware. People can see my feelings, not like I'm feeling them so loudly, they have to. And the flood of thoughts that rushed my mind were just, don't do anything. Don't stir the water. And that's all I could focus on. Just don't do anything. Nobody else cares. Well, I wasn't alone. In fact, there were a few on the floor that felt exactly the same way I did. And we just hadn't found each other yet. So I was near friends and allies who were supportive of me, and I didn't want to burden them. I still felt like I was in their space somehow. That's the booth, actually. The fallout that resulted from a brave reaction from a writer and author, Melissa Bennett, resulted in a laughable response from the CEO of Glispa. And that's another tangent for another story, and I only have 25 minutes. So if you're lucky enough to know me and my husband, you know that he is the peaceful one. I'm the one who starts fires. I'm the one who goes to war. I'm the one who will kick a hornet's nest if I know I'm right. I will, and I really love being right. But I was absolutely consumed by shame. I wanted to fight, but I couldn't move past my own weaknesses of feeling of isolation. That's how shame works. I wasn't white enough to be immune to the racism, and I wasn't Native American enough to be an authority on the matter. Now, this wasn't true, but it's what I believed, and that's what happened. And I made fun of my husband for fighting, and I did it out of self-preservation, and I did it out of pride. I took my weakness and I called it stoic, and I tried to not talk about it much after that. So, this is an example of how my shame kept me from acting, from telling the truth, from telling my story, and this is why we have a hard time telling our stories openly to groups of people. So how do you combat this shitty feeling that everyone has, no one wants to talk about, and it makes you want to hide away from the rest of the world and never come out, never actually ever think about it again? I was obsessed with finding the answer to that question, and this is what I learned. Most people have a hard time understanding the difference between shame and guilt. And for most, they're interchangeable. But in my readings, I've found that that's absolutely not the case. And Dr. Brene Brown explained it best, so I'm going to explain to you what she has told us. Guilt is, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Pretty easy. Shame is, I'm sorry, I am the mistake. She goes on to describe shame as the fear of disconnection. There is something about me that if people saw it, I would be unworthy. Shame severs human connection, so what recreates it? What establishes it? The answer is empathy. And although this sounds really obvious, how many of those conversations where we're trying to explain it turn out to be a translation, an explanation, this is why you need to care about me? In my work on blood quantum, many of the early designs were trying to teach empathy. One of my earliest designs I abandoned was a strict focus on the narrative. In another, I tried to give history lessons from the position of us, and I realized that I was starting off from a position of us and them. Maintaining that position reinforces the severed connection that was the result of generations of hate, segregation, and shame that made it nearly impossible to appeal to the empathy of others. So, no, I wasn't fucking ashamed of being Native American. I was ashamed that I felt like I was made up of broken pieces and too stupid to put it back together. Unless you come from a place of absolute privilege, and I am seriously happy for you if you do, like, good for you. You know what it's like to be treated with less than the respect you deserve. And even if you do come from a position of privilege, you've had to have felt that at least 2 or 3 times in your lifetime. Vulnerability, however uncomfortable, is necessary. Vulnerability is having a story born from life and experiences complete with its flaws and weaknesses, and telling it anyway. It's letting go of the things you think you should be and embracing what you are. I still have my shame. It's pretty obvious, I'd say. And it's always in the same place as it's in the same place as it always was. I hope that telling the story of blood quantum through my favorite medium, I can show and not translate or explain. Strength isn't having no weaknesses, it's doing the thing that's hard anyway, and doing it over and over again. Our stories with all our flaws and shame is the part that makes them beautiful, like being the first to say I love you, and being open with no guarantee that the response you want will come back to you. Severed connection and ignoring the us and them. Thank you. That's all I have. Any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to tell you that was really inspiring, and you have incredible courage to share that, because you just actually modeled being vulnerable, which is, I think, part of the problem. And, everyone has shame. That's kind of the elephant in the room. And so the more someone has the courage to actually talk about it, it gives others permission to talk about it. Mary Ann says that's so great. Once you shine the light to show, because we're all human, then everybody else has the courage to start coming together. So, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
There's another question.
Oh, another question?
You're not going anywhere.
I'm not going anywhere. Yeah, what's that?
Bloodquantum.com.
Renee.com, but I post on the death blog. Yeah?
What's the symbol?
That is the Native American pin for the Army Regiment that, in the Army, all the Native Americans who actually did enlist were in the same regiment, and that my father was in that. So, when I think about pride, I think about that. Yeah?
What was the name of the company you were talking about at that event?
Oh, Lispa. Lispa, your online rainmaker. Yeah.
How can we be better aware in our day-to-day lives? Lots of things.
There's absolutely nothing I can say or do to make someone else more aware of themselves. I think just trying goes a long way. Just trying to be aware. Like, the fact that you asked that question in the first place says a lot of your intention. And Rami put it best. It was like when somebody is talking about something that maybe you could be wrong about, shut the fuck up and let them talk. It's because they're tired of explaining themselves to people, like, as he said, people like you. But really, it is frustrating, and it always will be. But it's always worth the fight, right? I can't make people better at leading people. But you can control yourself though. Just listen. That's the best part. Right? Yeah?
I think for me, one of the hardest things is getting my experience validated as a person of mixed heritage.
Mhm.
And it's hard for me to say, I'm American. And it's just like, when people are like, but where are you from? I'm like, no, I'm American. You don't get it. I like pizza and hamburger. Like, that's it. What things have you felt are helpful to validate your experience as someone with a mixed heritage for yourself? Not validating to somebody else, but making things feel good to you.
Being genuine. I have a small anecdote, I think a little bit about that, which actually set me on the path to studying this. There was a couple, not from America, they were from Sweden actually, and when I was explaining to them the mechanics of my game and where it came from, they asked me to follow up obvious question, oh, so are you Native American? And I was preparing myself for the obvious, what always happens when I say, oh yeah, I'm Native. It's always, oh, what tribe are you from? Where can I put you on the map? And sometimes I'll even get that weird glossed over look on their face. Like they're trying to maybe picture me with feathers or something. Like they can't figure out why I don't look it. And then, oh, maybe now I see it. Like I didn't fit their symbolic idea of what a native looked like. And then when I said it, oh, okay. But what they did was different than all of that. They said, oh my God, that's awesome. I was like, what? I'm like, no, I know it is, but why do you think it? Like, I was somehow even suspicious of that. And it turns out that it's like, oh, that's so cool, you get to be here, like, that doesn't, not very many Americans get to have that, like, I get that, because I'm in Sweden, and something really magical happened, and I felt good about saying who I was. So, and what's even better was that it wasn't ingenuine. Right? They were really actually excited to talk to me about it. And not in a, please explain yourself kind of way, you're a walking museum and you owe it to me, sort of thing. So I think celebrating our differences is that big step. Yeah?
Hey, so your talk was really inspiring. And it reminded me a little bit of this blog post I read, if you might have seen it or not, that's running around on Facebook. It's called Artist Manifesto. And it talks about how easy it is for us to talk about shame. Our instinct is to reach for, we're sorry this isn't good enough. And like in various ways. So I'd like to ask you what the teacher in that blog post asked the students, like, what are you most proud of? Because, talking about what you've achieved and what you yourself feel like you've done well is incredibly empowering. So I'd like to hear what you feel like you've done really well.
Okay, I am most proud of the end result of pushing through all of this identity stuff. Because in the end of the day, I'm extremely happy. I'm happy to be Native American, I'm happy to be bisexual, I'm happy to be a female, I'm happy to be tall, I'm happy to have white skin. I'm happy about these things, and at one point in my life, I think I was ashamed of them at some point. But I am happy that I trudged through it, and then I came out on the other side loving it. And that's not something that everybody actually gets to have, and that's tragic.
Yes. So this whole thing reminded me of this a quick story. I was at a conference and a guy went out there and he was, doing his usual little slideshow, and then he started talking about his family and he burst into tears. And it was a room full of guys. It was about, 6 women. And he all of a sudden was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. And he held his head in shame. And like all the guys are like, they don't know what the hell to do. And so somebody, this other woman and myself, you're not allowed to do it. It was just another perfect example of having the courage to be true to yourself and to say it no matter what. It just allows everybody to be fully present.
I think I actually said earlier today that when I had given this talk before, I had somebody who was transgendered and they were really terrified to talk to me, so they actually went to Brenda Romero to talk to me. For some reason, she was less scary. And she told me what they had said, which was basically about how I told them their story, just the example I gave. And this is not exclusively a Native American plight, I hate that word, but it's always used for Native stuff. And it was a reminder that we all bleed, even though different things are what's cutting us. And I had mentioned that earlier.